It was an great American art critic once said that the problem with British artists is that once they get a bit of success, they feel they've got to buy a beautiful farmhouse away from things, create wonderful studios around it, create a perfect little world for themselves, and then they just keep doing the same thing over and over again. And they just get cut off from where it's all at. And I think one artist I can safely say hasn't done that is sitting beside me, Derek Boshier. And he, as everybody in this room knows, but I'll just reiterate for the sake of posterity, he came to prominence at one of the great moments in 20th century art, certainly from a British perspective, when a group of young artists, mostly based around the Royal College of Art in the particular year Derek was in, embraced a completely new kind of working that was based on what's right there in front of them now. Art that isn't in a Greek temple, it's not in the Royal Academy, it's on the stuff of life that's all around you. And I don't know, as anything that's come since quite overturned the importance of that. And we're talking about Derek, about Hockney, Alan Jones, R.B. Kittai, Peter Phillips, and someone we were talking about earlier, Norman Toynton, Pauline Boty. That was an incredible year. And from that, Derek has kept on changing and developing and moving forward. His work took a more conceptual bias with a political edge in the 70s. He's even now, he's looking at themes of appropriation, anti-capitalism, the demise of traditional power structures in his new work. I was looking at Ken Russell's film earlier on, that sort of iconic film of that original 60s moment, Pop Goes the Easel. Derek's sitting there in his room looking at Buddy Holly, and he's saying, Buddy Holly exemplifies everything I like about pop records. And this is at a time when nobody thought pop records. And now he's not still listening, he may still be listening to Buddy Holly, but he's also embracing K-pop, which is like what 19-year-olds are into, fusing that in some way with Greek mythology, taking it forward, ever forward with new change. And he says, change is basic to life along with opposites. And opposites within change are equally interesting. And I think that kind of sums up Derek Boshier's career. He's going to tell us a lot more about it now.
Sure. I once, in terms of giving a talk, I once did a lecture in '68 in Budapest, and I don't speak Hungarian, but 10 minutes, I had an interpreter, of course, and 10 minutes into the lecture, someone shouted from the audience, "Excuse me, but the translator's not saying what you're saying." So that could be a difficulty. It's only happened to me once. Yes, Royal College of Art at that time, David Hockney, Pauline Boty, all of them actually, except Pauline, we were all working class kids. And most of us came from the provinces. And the thing is that if the way of applying at that time, 57 it was, to the Royal College of Art, you had to send the Royal College of Art 8 paintings, 3 sketchbooks, 10, 15 drawings, and to present what you did. And in the first, you had to come up and stay in London if you came from the provinces. Well, David Hockney came from Bradford, Peter Phillips came from Birmingham, I came from Somerset, Dorset, and there were other people who, were from the provinces. And I remember, and funny enough, I only remembered yesterday, we were told to stay in the Burns Hotel in Earl's Court. So day one, everyone had to draw in the life drawing room. That was day one. I think David, myself, and others got into the Royal College because we were so keen on Stanley Spencer and also Carol Waite. So the first day, as I say, a whole day into life drawing room, go back to the hotel. Second day is the interview proper. All your work is put behind you and the professors are there. And when I got back to the hotel, there were a couple of people there. And one guy said, "Didn't I see you at the Royal College? Are you applying?" And I said, "Yeah." And he said, "Me too." And he said, "Do you think we'll get in?" And I said, "I hope so." And that was David Hockney. So I think an important element in that year at the Royal College, those 3 years, were many things. One was that we were all working class kids. And don't forget that at that very time in London, John Osborne was writing Look Back in Anger, which was about a relationship between a working class man and an upper class girl. And Arnold Westler, the Jewish writer, was writing something called The Kitchen, which was, instead of looking at plays, he went backstage where everyone was sweating and the cooks were there and stuff. So there was an ongoing thing. And of course, what I think we did also is what happened is, if you were working class, the only place you could get a further education, unless you were a genius and went to Oxford or Cambridge University, the only place that you could get a further education was, in fact, in art college. Art college was the place where you could get an actual further education. So that followed a little later with all the rock groups, you know, the Beatles and the stuff. Everyone, a lot of people going to art college, because as working class kids who wanted to be musicians, that they could hang out in art colleges and make, you know, I mean, everyone, Led Zeppelin, they all went to art college because that was a chance for further education. Finished.
So how did you come to bring together Greek mythology and K-pop in these new paintings? What was the starting point for this? Let's just want to talk about what's surrounding us now.
Yeah.
What was the starting point for these works?
Well, this exhibition, I tried something on that I would not normally try. That is, having an exhibition, and because the Gazelli Art House is on 2 floors, I was able to do one series of painting and a totally different series upstairs. So the first one I did, I painted upstairs first, totally, before I even started K-pop. And how that came about is I've always been interested in working for popular culture. I mean, I am so grateful that I had an academic training. I spent 4 years, Monday to Friday for 4 years, drawing the life model. And I'm very glad I did that because it gave me a good base. And I was also taught how to look at classical paintings, you know, how do Adit Gainsborough, Rembrandt, and, you know, everyone else, Matisse, structure a painting. So we were taught those basic things, and they never left us. And I think all of those people that we've just talked about did the same. And they, you know, they're good friends, so I know that they also said the same. But here we were, you know, 8 working class guys and Pauline from the provinces, and we were starting a new life. I mean, I did 2 years in the British Army, which I had to do. David was a conscientious objector, and David worked in mortuaries and stuff. And he tells great stories of the first week he went to work. And, you know, he said, "What can I do?" And they said, "There's a broom over there, sweep the floor." And then they all broke off for lunch. And they all got their lunch sandwich tins. And they just put them on the dead bodies and we're eating it, you know. David always said, and then David also worked in the forestry. So I went through 2 years, and you know, mandatory, so I had no choice. And they said, "Oh, what do you do?" And I said, "An artist." And they said, "Map making." So I was a cartographer for 2 years, which I enjoyed. It was good because I wasn't infantry or anything, although I nearly got sent to Cyprus when there was Mikaros was in power and was called a terrorist, but he was killing British soldiers, so I thought I didn't want to do that. And they cancelled my trip to Cyprus. So, Royal College of Art, I've always been interested in popular culture, so I was brought up in this very academic background, which I liked, but when we got to London, all of us, we thought, we want to paint things that interest us. Boys, girls, film, advertising, and those things that surround popular culture. I later extended that by, in the 80s and 90s, I worked with David Bowie and I worked with The Clash. And that was a good excuse to get my work beyond the art world. I don't know how many thousand people saw my work when I was doing pop art, but when I did, I worked with David Bowie and The Clash. That took me to an audience of millions. You wanted to ask me about Bowie and The Clash?
Well, funny, when you talked about Icarus,
Yeah. Oh, I haven't talked about.
don't you think that Bowie is a bit like the man? Remember the film, The Man Who Fell to Earth?
Oh yes.
He flew very near the sun, and he somehow managed to stay up there.
Yeah.
Was he a kind of successful Icarus in it?
Well, the point about David, he was so inventive. He had all these different personas that he changed. He told. I got to know David quite well, and surprisingly, once he said to me, and given that it was David Bowie, he said to me, to become famous, it's never by you. He said, it's always someone else that makes you famous. And I was thinking, David Bowie, all those different personas that he came up with, but he was adamant about that. You wanted me to talk about upstairs. So what I did, as I say earlier, I did 2 separate shows because there are 2 floors. And I took the Icarus myth, which, if you think about the Icarus myth, the Greek myth, it's a myth about huge, grand ambition and total failure. You're going to fly to the sun, but then the wax melts and he falls and drowns in the sea. So, given that I work off of public culture, I saw that as the perfect excuse to modernize the myth, because it now applies to the military, to corporate culture, and to politicians. They all tell lies. They all make up things. They all, So, and they all tell people. Like I was watching this morning the Conservative Party's new budget, and it was ridiculous what they were saying. Oh, this is the greatest thing that's happened to Britain, and it's going to be marvelous. And in 5 years' time, we'll be the richest country in the world. And this is marvelous, and it's all to do with. And the reason it's not doing well is Brexit. And well, you did Brexit. So I'm interested in public culture. So what I did upstairs was a series of paintings connected to the military, politics, and urban culture and corporate culture. So that's how that came about. Now, when I did that series upstairs, I did something that I always do to keep a consistency. If you look at all the paintings upstairs, they're exactly the same color. But I thought with this new series, I'd do something that I got a little scared about. And I said to myself, I'll paint every one of the paintings in K-pop a different color. because apart from the subject matter of what I do, there's also another side, and when I make paintings, I tend to like to set myself separate ambitions within the theme. So in this case, the first thing was I'll do everything a different color. Then I thought, maybe I'll keep all the paintings to 3 colors. Because, painting 101 is the more colors you put in a painting, the less colorful it is. I mean, that's a fact. So I thought, well, that's 2 things. What else am I going to do? Well, I remember my good friend Guy Brett, who died last year, and there was a thing at the Tate Modern last night in homage to him. And I sat in a lecture. They flew him into Texas from London, and he did a lecture on me. And that's only twice I've ever been to a lecture where I'm the sole subject. So he was talking, and one of the things he said, although Derek is obviously a narrative painter, a storyteller, it's quite obvious that he's influenced by abstract art. And I am. I love abstract art. I don't make it. I don't have a passion to make it, but I enjoy it. I mean, I enjoy abstract art a lot, but I don't have the passion. So I thought, number 3, I'll introduce elements of abstraction into these paintings and also simplify the paintings. And then I came to another decision I had to make. I thought I would like to test myself to put one more element into these paintings. And that element, I didn't know what I was going to do. And I looked at my left-hand side of my studio, and there was an image of Kellogg's cornflakes, to which I've been associated a lot with with pop art. But I've also, of all the letters of the alphabet, I've always done a lot about the alphabet K. I've done work about the Ku Klux Klan. I've done work about Kafka. And now I thought, well, K is for Korea. So I maybe put that in. So every one of these paintings, these 3 here and the 2 there, they're all started by me painting the K. I mean, if you look at every one of the Ks, you can imagine there's nothing else in the background, it's just white. And of course, I had plenty of source material for K-pop because I photographed 120, 130 photographs from the television screen when K-pop was playing. So I had no problem with source material. And I usually don't have problems because I collect images. Plus, Google, and nowadays you can get anything. I think someone told me they were testing it out, and they did a series of Google searches, and they put rabbits with 3 legs. 100 images come up, so you can get that. So to say a little bit more about the K-pop, I am particularly interested in one aspect of K-pop. That is something called King of Masked Singers. So to explain that, it would be like you get Korea's most popular young singer, and what they do, it would be like the Beatles singing a Rolling Stones song. So they disguise their songs with things that are not unfamiliar. And the whole concept is about disguise and stuff. So that lady there is interesting. That lady with the white, she's called the Queen of Horses. I watched that program that she was in. She sang, and then she took off her mask. And the audience was so amazed. They couldn't believe it. I mean, even more surprised than normal. And it turns out that she was one of the most well-known faces in the whole of South Korea. She was just retired. She was a newscaster. She was #1 newscaster. And what people didn't know she had early training as an opera singer. So that's how that came about. Someone came here, and a friend in Los Angeles said, "Oh, for your show, I've got a good friend. He's American, and he works in London. He works for K-pop." So I was lucky to get it. And I told him about the newscaster. He said, "Oh, they have basketball players, everyone. Everyone is, all sort of people." So that's the basic fascination with, popular culture. It just happens to be someone else's popular culture, but that popular culture is spread. There's a British version, American version, a French version, Italian version of K-pop. And they're all terrible, or absolutely terrible. Really vulgar and bad and celebrity-based. Whereas the Korean pop music has kept that great, refined Korean Asian culture. It's stayed there. That Asian culture dominates these things. So that's another aspect, which I only learned when I started to photograph and watch a lot of things.
Did you just discover it at random, just channel hopping, or did you have some kind of intro into it?
No, I often switch channels all the time. I look at every language. I have no idea what it's about. And sometimes I don't know what country it is. Is it Albanian? What is it, Serbian? And sometimes I watch it and it's just fascinating because you don't know what the hell's happening because you can't read the text, but you can try to understand what they're doing, especially in game shows. Even British game shows are so crazy what they ask the people to do. But when you're looking at some other culture, maybe Russian game shows, you think, what the hell are they doing? Because you can eventually work it out. But again, popular culture is what I've always been interested in. And yes, I was channel switching. And I saw this, and I started to watch it. And then, of course, I had source material because I photographed 120 images. I shot on my iPad. I just shot stuff off of the TV screen while they were singing. So that was easy. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I'm not one of those artists who works through angst. I've never, ever been an anxious person in art all my life. I'm a totally non-angst. Now, having said that, some art has to come out of angst. For me, it's not. I just enjoy it. I just do it. I don't have any problems with making stuff. I just enjoy myself when I'm doing it. I was teaching photography at the Royal College of Art in the 90s. And I was in the dark room with the red light and, pre-digital, of course. And I was working. There's someone else working, and he was, and I can't remember his name, but he was a very famous photographer. And he said to me, Derek, I've been doing this for 50 years. And every time I put that bit of paper into the developer, and he said, I watched that image come up. I said, I'm fascinated. And I told him that that's exactly the same with painting. Wondering what's happening. Sometimes you, as much as 3/4 of the way through one of these paintings, and you can't. And of course, there's different sides. For instance, the American critic Susan Sontag said, of course, a lot of people totally disagree. She said that art theory is the death of creativity because you work it out before. Now, that doesn't mean that's bad. I mean, Bridget Riley, an artist who I really like, works out everything before, but she's so brilliant that that it works, basically.
So do you think of yourself as fundamentally a painter still?
I've come back to that period. Let me see. One of the deciding factors was when I was at the Royal College in 1960. The Royal College of Art put on, a week before Christmas, they put on satirical reviews. So we all acted, and Pauline Botti was very involved in that. And we wrote sketches and we appeared in them. I remember writing a short sketch, which was a conversation between Beethoven and Errol Flynn, the 50s. And they were in heaven, of course. And, Errol Flynn was saying, well, you and the ladies, I mean, what's that? That's just publicity. And Errol Flynn was saying, oh, you're not really deaf. You're not really deaf. And it was a conversation that we had. I played one of the characters, can't remember which. But there was a guy called Roddy Maud Roxby who, like Pauline Botti, had a dilemma about what career she should follow, whether she would be an actor or whether she would be a painter. And she was getting very successful as an actor. I mean, she was in a play at the Royal Court. She had a minimal cameo part in Michael Caine film. What's it all about, Alfie?
Alfie.
Alfie, just called Alfie.
Yeah.
And she had a little part in that. I think she was a person that worked in the coffee bar. So she had a lot of things going on in her life. So there was this guy called Roddy Maud Roxby who was at the Royal College before us, and he was keen on acting. And it was him that did satirical reviews. And he taught three of us how to do mime. We did the white face, we did the blue and white sweater, we wore leotards, and we did mime. We studied mime, but okay, I'll tell you one story. David Hockney and myself and a few others, if you worked in a painting school and you needed a job, part-time job, you could always work at the Royal Court Theatre as a stagehand. In fact, that's where I discovered Samuel Beckett. But the point about that is that we knew we got to know some of the actors, but mainly other stagehands. And when they heard we were doing these reviews, they used to come up to the Royal College and sit in. And amongst many other facets, the three of us did mime, and we were trained. We knew nothing about it, but we were trained to do mime. And one day, the only place in London, in the west part of London, that you could get a cup of coffee after 10 o'clock was a place called the Troubadour in Earl's Court, still going. And they used to have downstairs, apart from the coffee bar, downstairs they had jazz nights and folk singing. So we used to go there because, 10 o'clock, we couldn't get anything in London in the early 50s. So we went there, and it was run by a guy called Mike, and he was a Canadian, and he was huge. He was like 6'3", and just burly, but the gentlest person. And he came to our performance of mime, and he said, look, I'm doing a birthday party for someone. Would you, three of you, come and do what you've just done on stage? I don't know. And they said, okay. He said, look, I can't pay you. But he said, if you come, you can have as much drink and food as you like. So we said, oh, yeah, sure, we're just students, So, so a couple of weeks went past, and we went to the Troubadour, one of us, and we said to Mike, "Oh, by the way, who's the party for?" And they said, "Oh, it's Marcel Marceau." God, you know, give it a break. So that's what we did, and he was very good. And I got offered a place in his mime school in Paris, tutor free for one semester. But that's one of the things I think that connected David Bowie and I. You know, I had often done The Falling Figure in the early 60s, and David had always been interested in The Falling Figure, you know, as you said, the man who fell to earth. He had studied mime in a much more serious way than I did. So we had that influence of mime. We were also both working class kids, so that we had that in common. And there was a few other things, you know. I had worked with, interested in music, particularly pop music. So we got together. I had curated an exhibition at the Hayward Gallery in '79. And it was an exhibition in which, as a curator, I tried to mix high art and low art. So, you know, David Hockney was in it, Kitai was in it, court painters were in it, the royal family, they painted the royal family. But I wanted other things. And in my own opinion, this is only an opinion, I think the best photographer from the 1960s was a man called Brian Duffy. And he's still called Duffy today. He died. But I just thought of him. I'd followed him. And he seemed to have been the most, I mean, David Bailey is a great photographer, but he's always been in the right place at the right time. He's just been where celebrities are. And he's a terrific photographer. But for me, Duffy was always the person. I watched his ads. I watched all the other things. Anyway, I put him in a show at the Hayward Gallery. And the show I did was called Lives, Lives, Lives. And the subtitle was Artists Who Use Other People as the subject matter of their art. So there was no abstract art, no landscape art, no performance, artists who worked off of self. So it was people who looked out into others. And a few weeks later, I had a phone call from Duffy, and he said, "Oh, Derek," he said, I know you quite well. And he said, I think I've got another friend, and he said, "I think you'll really get on." And the way he faced it, I thought it was female. I thought it was a blind date. And I thought, oh, good. And I went there, and of course it was David. He said, "I've just finished my third album of the Berlin trilogy. And would you like to collaborate and do something?" So that's how I got to design Lodger. And then I went on to design stage sets for him. I painted him several times as, man. He played on off Broadway, Elephant Man. He played the part of the Elephant Man. And when I was in New York, just before I went to Texas, I'd rented a loft there. And David called me up. He said, you still want to do that portrait of me? And I said, "Oh, yeah." And I thought, I don't know how fast I was going to do a portrait, just the size. And it was to do with David's eyes. Most of you might know that he has an incredibly small pupil and a huge on this side. So I was all ready. And then he came, and I knew he was playing the Elephant Man. So I said, "David, how's the Elephant Man?" And he said, "Oh, it's great." He said, "I have to stand on stage for 5 minutes sometime." And he distorted his face, and I thought, that's the portrait. So I did him as the Elephant Man. He bought that one, and I've actually just sold the second one, 50 years later or 40 years later. So, yeah, that was a connection with David.
So he said to you that if you become famous, it's not you.
Yeah.
It's always, what did he mean by that?
Well, he said that you never make yourself famous. And coming from him, I thought that was extraordinary.
So who made you famous then?
Just critics and exhibitions and stuff like that over the years, you know.
Yeah, yeah.
So,
Yeah.
oh,
It's quite interesting that when you're talking in that Pop Goes the Easel film, and in many things you've said, you've sounded quite sceptical about the American influence on Britain. Like people like Richard Hamilton and Hal were very, and Peter Phillips, of course, very wholeheartedly enthusiastic about American cars. America's the way forward. But you sounded very skeptical.
I was a critique of the American culture, basically. Even though I now live there, but yeah. Or for instance, I never ever painted a pin-up. I mean, everyone thinks pop art, you know, Peter, the two Peters, everyone, Pauline, everyone does pin-ups. And I never did. I never painted a pin-up. I mean, recently, maybe just 20 years ago, I've been painting transsexuals, you know, women breasts and penises naked. So I have done, I suppose that might be a pin-up, I don't know. So, but I within pop art, I never touched a model, a pin-up, in fact. I don't know, I just seem to always, someone wrote an article about me and said, Derek was the worst artist to look at Korea.
Really?
Yeah. Because I used to know Eduardo Palazzi quite well. And I used to go around to Palazzi's house in Chelsea and just knock on the door, and if he was in, we'd have a cup of tea or coffee. And Eduardo once said to me, he said, you know how to get on in the art world? He said, what you got to do is find an icon and then just repeat it for 50 years. And then he said, but don't do it. But Derek, don't do it. And I you know, that was fine. And I spent a whole morning with Mark Rothko in New York because he and I both got the wrong days that we were supposed to visit. We were visiting Helen Frankenthaler and Robert. Anyway, we were visiting their house, and he got the day. And when we got there, they said, "Oh God, you got the day. Go in the library, and we'll bring coffee and tea for 2 or 3 hours, and you can sit in there and talk to Rothko." So I talked to Rothko, and I said, you know, I'd just been to your show at the Marlborough in London, and this must have been 63, 64. You know, I was like 2 years out of art college, and we talked about. I said, you know, Mark, I said, I noticed that you had the basement and not the big gallery at Marlborough in London upstairs. He said, no, I asked for the basement. I wanted to be in a refined space. I said, oh. And I said, I noticed that your paintings are that much off the ground and that much off the ceiling. Why is that? He said, I don't like, of all people, I don't like people stepping back from my paintings. I mean, for me, when you look at a Rothko, you're always on a rotary, you know, to experience it from different levels. So we talked about that, and we talked just generally about painting. And then, right at the end of the morning, he said to me, do you want to know how to get on in the art world? You know, myself, 2 years out of art college at Royal College. Well, yes, please. He said to me, marry a rich woman. That was his advice to me.
Did you take it?
No. No. You have some other questions about other subject matters?
Yeah. What was the very first moment when you realized, because you got into the Royal College of Art because you were into Carol Waite and these sort of people. What was the moment when you thought you could actually just start looking at your own culture that was around you? Was there a specific instance?
I think it was because we all had an academic training for 4 years and loved it.
Yeah.
But we were new. We came from the provinces. We were working class. Here was a brand new city, London. Whoa. what's going on? You know, this is a brand new experience. And I think it was that point we all all thought, maybe I should I should paint the things that I'm interested in, which, as I said, were boys, girls, pop music, and we latched on to popular culture. So we thought, you know, I had stopped making I think the word is verisimilitude. That is looking at something and copying it. I'd done that for 4 years and I got quite good at it. I think we all did. And I thought, I'm not interested in doing that. I want to use my memory and my own experience as a young person in a new city or London. So that's how we got into it. And I don't think we had any idea. I remember seeing an interview by John Lennon, and he said, he said, I hope we like being the Beatles, but he said, I hope we last 5 years. And 5 years, pretty good. So there was those aspects, and then it was the same with us. I mean, the person who took off most was David Hockney. And, you know, he was, well, first of all, David is very articulate. It's a pleasure to be with him. I found that it's been a great pleasure to be with David Bowie and David Hockney. They're both so interesting. Their conversation, and we got on well because we talked about things. So, I guess the answer to your question is we didn't think of it as getting famous or anything. We just thought, God, I hope I can get a teaching job when I leave here.
Last question. Before we throw it open to the audience.
Yeah.
But just before we were talking, I said, do you have a particular artist who really excites you the most? And you said, there's many, but the person who's influenced me most was, who was it?
Samuel Beckett.
And why was that?
Because I think Samuel Beckett, rather like Shakespeare, totally understood the human condition. You know, before Beckett wrote all his seminal works, you know, Waiting for Godot, Krapp's Lost Tape, Endgame, all those most famous things, he said, and he never talks about his work hardly, he said that what he was interested in was being an intellectual, and that he would learn things about things and he reinterpret it, knowledge, and pass it on. But there was, I'll cut the story short, but his mother got seriously ill and he flew back, trained back to Ireland to see his mother. And he said after that, he changed his life of how he worked. And what he said he did was, instead of knowing, he was interested in not knowing, but not in the sense of ignorance, but the sense that most of us live in the world now. I mean, we know so little. Science has produced, great changes, but nothing really. And Samuel Beckett says one interesting thing. I've seen all of Beckett's plays. I asked to design one of the sets for a Krapp's Lost Tape, but someone else is already doing it. One of the things that Beckett said is, he said that he thought that music was the greatest of all the arts, theatre, visual arts, everything, because it wasn't burdened with exactitude. I mean, you don't stop a Beethoven or a Mozart concert and say, "Oh, stop! Why did you play that? What's that about?" I mean, you don't. You experience it, music, very directly, and that's true of classical music, and it's true of public culture, pop music. So I got to study him and learn about him, and everything I learned, I thought, God, this man understands life. And it was, as I say, the two people who, it's just amazing that they know so much about the human condition. and that was Shakespeare and Samuel Beckett. So I've always been a fan of his work, and I've always been what he tried to do in his creative work. You know, the point about it is what separates creative people from non-creative, that's in theatre, music, film, visual arts, is basically opportunity. You had it. And that's why working class people in the late 50s got in there and practiced creativity. And it was in the art world and later in the music world. My own background, you know, I often hear artists talking about, you know, how they started art and what they did. And, you know, all artists say, oh, I was drawing when I was 3 years old. Well, yes, that's true. Every single child draws when they're 3 years old. I didn't have a great interest in art. My parents were working class. My mother and father were living caretakers in a posh girls' school in Dorset. So I was brought up, I mean, as a working class kid, I was exposed. I lived in this grand house. And I think that affected me. And they had a library, and I never read much, but I found National Geographic magazines, and I pored over them. Not only the subject matter of maybe tribal people or ethnicity and, you know, countries, but they had a lot at the back on contemporary refrigerators and contemporary. I was fascinated by that. And so I got into grammar school, which every child in England at that time had to sit what was called 11 plus, and it was a class thing, because, you know, middle class people obviously have much more books in their house than working class kids. And I sat the exam, and my parents said that if I passed, they'd buy me a bicycle. Oh, good. So 2 weeks later at the school, they read out the names of the successful candidates for the grammar school, and my name wasn't on it. But at 11 o'clock, I had to go and see the headmaster, and I thought, oh, God, what have I done? You know, you never saw the headmaster. You saw his assistants. And he said to me, sit down, Boshier. And I thought, maybe my parents had died. You know, I thought it was something very serious. And he said, well, your name was not on the list of successful candidates to go to grammar school. And I said, no, sir. And he said, in fact, your name was on the list. And these were his actual words. We thought there'd been a typing error. So they spent 2 hours phoning Dorchester County Hall to check. And so I got to grammar school, and I had no interest in art. I was interested in geography and history. And I left at 16 to help my parents out financially. And the only person that said anything to me was the art master. And he said, well, Boshier, very bad idea to leave school at 16. What are you going to do? And I said, oh, I'm going to become a butcher. He said, a butcher? I said, well, my best friend, Don, didn't get into art college. And his father manages a butcher shop in Sherborne in Dorset. And he offered me a job. And he said, oh. And he said, had you ever thought of doing art? And I said, what's art? He said, it's what you do on Thursday afternoons. I said, oh, I quite like that. Basically, he got a portfolio for me together. I went to one of the smallest art colleges in England, in the Yeovil School of Art, which was basically a farming community, but also had a helicopter industry, Westerns. So it just changed my life. Within a week and a half, I went to art school, and I thought, fuck, this is it. I want to do this. It's very challenging, but it's so interesting. You can make things up. It's not like mathematics or science. You can actually make things. And I got hooked in the first, and I never stopped. I did 4 years at Yeovil School of Art and then got into the Royal College. And I think there's certain things that shaped my life, and that was for your NDD, for your 4 years you did as an undergraduate, you had to write a thesis. And I wrote my thesis on the kitchen sink school that Jack Smith, John Bratby, Edward Miladich, and one or two others, Derek Greaves, who I'm now in contact with him. He's in his 90s. And I saw them at some opening, and I said, I want to thank you because you started my career. And they were very nice. And I don't know if you know, the kitchen sink school they started to paint working class conditions. I mean, John Barry did his painting of the aftermath of the working class breakfast, donuts and half open things. So, yeah, I think I was influenced that. And actually, I saw that painting recently in Southampton University collection, or no, City of Southampton collection. And I saw that painting, and there was amongst the things on the table was a small packet of cornflakes, and it had a K in it. So I may have been influenced by that. As for my interest in painters are so wide, I was once in my gallery in Paris, and I wanted to go to a show called Matisse in Nice. And David Bowie came to my opening, and he said, "Oh, you'll go, and I can't get in. Once they see me, they'll tear me to pieces. They'll take my." So I got him into the Matisse in Nice show, and I did a tour of every Matisse painting. It was good. The point about David, though, is I know this as a fact. He went to Vienna, where all of the great Bruegel paintings are. I think there's 9. I mean, I think England has one Bruegel, America has one Bruegel, Vienna has all of them. And so David, this is what he does, and what he often used to do. He'd say to his secretary and person, who's the world's leading expert on Bruegel? And they said, they looked it up, and they said, he is, but he's now living in Ceylon or somewhere. They said, fly him into Vienna. I want him to take me around the Bruegel show. Not bad. When I designed the Lodger LP, he said, we better knock this Lodger, this Elban on the head. And it was a Friday, and I said, if we go with this, I'll have everything ready by Tuesday. And David said, oh, give yourself a chance. What about Thursday? And I said, yeah. And he said, good. He said, come to Berlin for lunch. Rock star. That was good.
Should we have some questions from the audience?
Sure.
Marvellous. Questions, anybody?
Have I shut you up?
Gentleman here.
Yeah.
Thank you. Derek, you said at the beginning that you, at art school, you did life drawing Monday to Friday, 8 hours a day or whatever it was. And I know Peter Blake did the same.
Yeah.
That doesn't happen now in art schools.
They close drawing rooms down.
Do you think that's a bad thing?
Well, I mean, yeah, it's rather sad, I think. I do all sort of things. I make NFTs as well. So I'm involved in high tech. So, but I think if you said to me, draw someone naked jumping over a fence, I could do it. Draw someone who's fallen over, male or female, I could do it. I just had so much experience in academic studies. And I said, I've never regretted it, because I could always draw the academic figure, male or female. For instance, if you gave me a photograph of anyone fully clothed, in their suits or their overcoats, I could next do it. I could draw what they look like naked, because that's the way you see people. That's the way you understand the anatomy of people. And also, I have this thing where I think, and I've said this many times, that I can teach anyone to draw. Anyone in this room I could teach to draw. Now, I can teach you to draw from nowhere to somewhere. The difficult part is going from the somewhere further on, and that's up to you. I can't do that. I can suggest methodologies. I can get you from nowhere. I can fill you in with all the basic stuff. People say, "Oh, I can't draw a straight line." Well, the drawing is not about a straight line. I mean, that's very important in architecture, of course. But it's not. It's I taught drawing for 10 years, and I used to do specific drawing courses, and that was fun, just to get people out of their box and get them to sort of take risks and try things out they hadn't tried out. So, yeah.
Anyone else?
There he is. There she is.
Right, so you talked about Bruegel, and a lot of the Icarian figures, or at least one that I can see upstairs with the legs splashing out of the water, are very reminiscent of the Bruegel Fall of Icarus, where Icarus is just a tiny little detail around the rest of the world that's ignoring him and is farming and doing their daily life. Was there any inspiration that came from that painting, or what do you think about that painting in relation to your Icarian?
Well, Bruegel is one of my favorite painters, so I know the work, and I know that painting. And when I started the Icarus series upstairs, I immediately thought of that particular painting. And, you'll see that the K is in every one of these paintings. And if you go upstairs, Icarus is falling into the sea in every painting upstairs. And, I just use it as a starting point. I tend to paint. I mean, Guy Brett was right when he said, although Derek's a narrative painter, he's influenced by abstraction. I think I paint like an abstract painter, even though I'm very figurative. Therefore, I put something down, I get something to react, and I got two things to react. Then I put a third thing in, and I react with that. That's the way I tend to work. And as I mentioned earlier, I had these earlier propositions. Every painting will be a different color. There'll be 3 colors. There will be an element of abstraction in it. So while I'm working on a painting, and also, every artist is different. You can't tie artists down. Like, for instance, every single artist who starts a new series of work, whether they're doing, bowl of fruit or anything, or an abstract painting, the artist has to think, what am I going to do next? Am I going to do what I was doing before? Am I going to do what I was doing before with variations? Am I going to do a totally new series, whatever it is? Now, I also work quite quickly. So this show is on in October. My next show here is 2 years exactly from now. And I've started the first painting for the show. I know how to say, I can't see it now. I've got to finish the painting. I've got to do it. I never work like that. I just work systematically over a longer period of time. So, yeah.
Question?
Especially down here, but also upstairs, there is a really interesting sense of childlike joy and wonder that pairs quite interestingly with the critique of capitalism in your work, especially with the K symbol. Is there anything about that, or?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, it's about that, but it's also about taking images from popular culture that is known and re-establishment in a different context, which is what I've done with the Special K. Yeah, very, very conscious of doing that. Even though K is for career, it does represent a commercial aspect. Funny enough, the Kellogg's Cornflake Corporation have the best record working with workers. They have generous pay, they have generous health things, and I only discovered that much later, that they are a company, and I think they're a Quaker company. Not sure. Yeah,
Anyone else?
yeah. Come on.
Come on. Derek's saying, come on, come on.
Oh no, I didn't get my bike. Oh, I did. Yeah, I got my bike. Yeah, working. My parents gave me the bike.
Derek, just
Yes.
quickly, what's your biggest achievement to date? What do you think has been your biggest achievement? And another follow-on question is, if you had to do something differently, what would it be?
Well, it might be very different, the images, but they would all come from popular culture. You know, I mean, as an artist, of course, you know, you like good reviews. Bad reviews are written by arseholes who don't know what they're talking about. But best reviews are, I think, from my point of view, you obviously want a good review, but it is a review in which you learn something about your work. I remember way back in '64, and I think it was, what was his name? Very interesting abstract painter. Who I got phoned up and Robin Denny was writing about a show I had. And he said, it was good because people rang me up and they said, hey, you got a full page with 2 color reproductions in art something, not art form, but art international it was. So they said, God, and then another person rang out. And when the third person came out, I better go and buy a copy, and my ego takes over. So I go up to Smith's right by Notting Hill Gate Tube Station, and I buy a copy. And I start to read it. And it starts off very well. It's very complimentary. And then halfway through, it said it's obvious that Derek Boshier doesn't know what his paintings look like to other people. And I thought, well, bugger, no, he's right. And I had to come to terms with it. So what I did, I had a studio in Putney, and I went up 2 floors, and there was a small bedroom and a kitchen. And I thought, I'll have a meal, eat a meal. And every time I thought about the painting I was working on and what Robert Denny had said, I just put it out of my mind. And then finally, after eating, I ran down the stairs, opened the studio door, and I tried to look at my painting for the first time. What I do now is I can do that within half a minute. So I can look at a painting and I can look away and I can look back and see it. But those are the things that you're trained to do, you know. Anyway, you just learn by making mistakes and doing things. You know, you just learn the process of painting by making many paintings. I always think that some artists know too much about what they're doing before they start, and their paintings are about paintings. And my paintings are always about the subject matter. I mean, what happens when I'm working on them, they appear, but they are based on the concept. What am I doing? K-pop is about K-pop, is about images, is about, upstairs is about Icarus myth. And, I've no idea. I mean, when I start all these paintings, I have no idea what I'm going to do. Absolutely no idea. And I think for me, that's a good thing because it leaves open creativity. So many artists look at other arts and want to, they love it so much that they want to do that art. And I always tell students, don't look at other art, learn from it. Learn things like how to compose, what colors to use, and all that sort of thing. But don't try to paint existing paintings. I mean, so many people that had academic training, they paint 19th century paintings. And contemporary art has always had a hard time. Tate was probably the most popular painter in the history of art. If it's not Van Gogh, it's Monet. When Monet started to paint his paintings, everyone said, "What do you think?" And they all said, "Well, just thrown paint against, it's all thrown paint. There's nothing there." And then 50 years later, you show people painting, say, "What's there?" Say, "Well, there's a footpath there and a river, and there's two houses there." And people wouldn't see it. But early on, Monet was threatened by the French government to go to Devil's Island. They said he was a disgrace to France for painting these paintings. Disgrace. And he should be sent to Devil's Island. I mean, Monet, the most popular imagist now. So it happens with all contemporary art. I know we talked to someone the other day who hated what's the name? Abramovich, who I think is a terrific artist. But they said, she's not doing art. And I said, well, art, different changes all the time. I mean, when the Dada movement started to make Dada paintings, they said, oh, this is not art. And art's always been like that. It's always been challenging to what it comes out of. So, yeah, so on.
Last question. And then we'll all have a drink. Go on.
Hi there. Just so you can see me. I heard you mention NFTs.
Yeah.
So does everyone here know what an NFT is, or NFT art, rather? Familiar? Like buying digital art on the crypto platforms, you pay with cryptocurrency. So that's quite a fairly new thing, and it's mostly very young people involved in that. So how's that for you? How did you get involved? How are you finding it?
Well, I got involved because it's a medium that I'd never used before, and I wondered what image I would make to make an NFT. And I looked at it, and the advice was don't make it longer than 20 seconds. Best to animate, make sure the image changes. And those are all the things I like, because I do that in my films. Animate one object into another. So I just thought, and I work with my good friend who's also a techie, and he knows about FMC, so we work together. I couldn't have done it without, in fact, actually online at this moment for the next 4 days, this painting is an NFT. We've animated it. So all these images come and join together. So, we've got another one we've done all about David Bowie, and that's not been put up yet. And we got another one we've worked on. So, I don't know, I just see it as like someone as a painter who's never done etching before. Have a go, what do you make of etching? So NFTs come out of just one's normal thinking, why don't you have why don't you make an NFT of a painting and animate it and make it 20 seconds? It's online. There's only a bid for 2,000 on it at the moment. And we sold an earlier one for 10,000, but I'm hoping that we got 4 more days and it's going to go up. So I don't know, but I don't think in that area. I think in the area of experimentation, which, you know, try to do something new. Try to, you know, I'm not interested in copying things. I'm not interested in copying things. What I like is, and I always explain my work in this way, and that is that if you talk to a person who is an expert on color theory, what they'll say is, you put that orange down and you put a green next to it, it changes. The orange doesn't become something else. So, and that's true of images. You put an image down and it's understandable, you know what period it comes from, black and white or color, and you may know where it is, but you put another image next to it, just like you would if you're a color theorist, and it totally changes. And that's an aspect that I'm interested in, you know, and of course it's such an old-fashioned notion. I mean, advertisers have done that for years. You want to sell a car, put a woman in a bikini in front of it, you know, I mean, that's the old thing. Although they're cutting that down now. But that is what it's about, manipulating images. And that's what advertising is about, which is often very interesting, I think. There's a lot of good stuff in advertising. If I can steal from advertising, I will, you know. I did. One last thing then. We were talking about artists in the early 50s. Picasso officially became a member of the Communist Party. So one of the British trade unions had a trade union conference. I think it was in Sheffield. I may have the right city. It was in the north. And they asked Picasso to come as the star speaker. So Picasso got to Dover and then caught the train from Dover to whatever town, I don't think it was Waterloo, but whatever town, whatever station you go to drive to Sheffield in a chauffeur-driven car. So he went, and the buzz in the art world is who, I mean, Damien Hirst wasn't born, but who was the Damien Hirst of the day? You know, who was everyone concentrating on? And it happened to be someone who taught at Newcastle School of Art called Victor Passmore. Wow. And he was #1 British abstract painter. And they wanted 2 people, a younger artist who could speak French, and they chose Alistair Grant, who later became head of the printmaking department at Royal College. So they get into the car, and it's decided that Victor Passmore will start the conversation. So Victor Passmore turns to Picasso and said, "Je suis un peintre. I am a painter." And Picasso turns to him and said, "Moi aussi." Me also. I'll leave you with one other thing that Picasso said when he left England. He said, Picasso said, "I can't understand why every English artist is not a landscape artist." He loved British landscape. So, you know, good one.
Thank you very much, Derek. That was marvelous. Thank you.